Welcome to the Billable Mom podcast, led by attorney Cari, where we discuss working motherhood, but especially geared to professional mothers who are trying to juggle their time. Our time is precious, both at work and at home. We talk time management and productivity hacks, the struggles of being a working parent, and provide a community where other billable moms are also trying to calm the chaos 6 minutes at a time. Listen to stories of other working moms, but especially lawyer moms, navigate the waters balancing career and the ever-present demands of motherhood.
Tiffany Dowell Lashmet, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Cari, thanks for having me.
You know, I was thinking about it this morning, and we have known each other for a really long time. I'm going to say maybe around 14 years or so. Is that right?
Yeah, I was going to say, I bet you we're close to 15 now.
So I know the Tiffany pre-wife, pre-kids, and, you know, you have had quite a journey. So why don't you tell our listeners who you are and what you're doing now, and then we'll get into a little bit of your path to motherhood.
Sure. Yeah. My name's Tiffany Lashmet. I am an extension agricultural law specialist working for Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. So I live with my husband and our 2 kids here in the Texas Panhandle. My job takes me all over the state of Texas doing kind of educational outreach to rural landowners and ag producers about legal issues that they face. In addition, because that's not chaos enough, we have a ranching operation here in Texas. And then we're also involved pretty heavily with my family's show lamb operation and our family farm in eastern New Mexico.
Well, Tiffany, I have a lawyer crush on you because not only are you just an incredible speaker and so knowledgeable on agriculture law issues, but I feel like you are also very inspiring to women. And I really love how on social media you kind of just are very real about it, very real about the whole thing. And so I wanted to note that I admire that.
That's sweet. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. So you, prior to working at Texas A&M Extension, you were in private practice. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So I graduated from law school and took a job at a civil litigation firm in Albuquerque. It's kind of a boutique firm. There were like 7 lawyers, and we did civil litigation ranging from, you know, kind of insurance defense type work to plaintiffs malpractice work, all the way up to like really multi-million-dollar class actions. It was a great firm. I really learned to be a lawyer there, loved the people that I worked with, and truthfully, had this job opportunity at Texas A&M not come across my desk, I'd probably still be there.
So if my memory serves me correctly, Tiffany, you were at Texas A&M when you were pregnant and had your first child. Is that right?
That's right. Yes. Yep. So I started working at A&M, and then about a year and a half after that, I got married. And then about a year after that, had my first child. And a year after that, had my second child. So I was at A&M the whole time.
A lot of changes very quickly.
Yeah.
So talk to me about, you know, how it was while you were pregnant, being a working mother, and maybe that initial transition for you.
Yeah. So I think chaos would probably be the words to sum that all up. So I got pregnant shortly after we got married, and had a terrible initial pregnancy with my little boy. His name is Braun. I was horribly sick. So, you know, I heard about morning sickness and thought, okay, well, I can deal with this, but it lasted forever. It was like 8 months of morning sickness. They had me on a cocktail of like multiple different drugs just to keep any food down. So it was miserable. So I remember I'm traveling all over the state, right? I keep like barf bags in my car. When I would get up to speak, I would have to tell them, like, if I have to take a break, just excuse me for a minute, because I've frankly got to run outside and puke, right? So that was sort of difficult. And then, you know, Braun was born, and then I kind of got just tossed into motherhood, and I was really, I think, ill prepared. Now, in fairness, I'm not sure you can be well prepared, but I wasn't. So I really hadn't ever been around babies. I didn't know anything about newborns or any of that. So had Braun, and like I say, kind of got tossed into the deep end a little bit. I struggled a lot with breastfeeding. That just wasn't something I was able to do. I tried for a couple of months, and at his 2-month appointment, he was like failure to thrive, and he was basically starving. So we dealt with that. He also had horrible acid reflux and would like projectile vomit across the room. I mean, across the room. So we had that. He was a terrible sleeper. So had that on. And then I suffered, which Cari, you know this, I suffered with some postpartum depression as well. And so it really was kind of the perfect storm of just like, what have I done with my entire life with that first baby in those next few months?
Well, Tiffany, and I know that we're going to talk about this throughout the podcast, but I've known you for a long time. And to be perfectly candid with you, I had no clue that you were going through any of those struggles. So I think that that's a thing that a lot of new mothers go through, is they feel like they are sort of alone in that experience.
Oh, I think that's exactly right. And I have changed my ways since I was in that. And now I am very vocal about things like, finding it really difficult and needing help and postpartum depression. I really speak out about that now because I do think you feel really alone when you're in it. A saving grace for me, I had one friend who had a couple of kids ahead of me, and she had talked to me about postpartum depression and that she had had a hard time. And not, you didn't project any of that on me, just very simply said like, hey, if you have a hard time and you feel like you're not sure this is for you, it's okay. Like, I'm here to talk, because I knew what that felt like. It was my friend Kelly, and she just saved my life with that, because I knew that Kelly was a good mom, right? And so when I started feeling these things, I was like, well, wait a minute, I can still be a good mom and struggle with this. And I know that's true because I know Kelly, right? So in light of that, I have really kind of changed how I approach a lot of sharing different parts of motherhood and life, because I think it really matters.
So talk to me. You were at Texas A&M Extension. Did you have a maternity leave, and how much maternity leave did you have?
I did. So, and that's something else I did not understand at all, was the concept of maternity leave, right? I learned that there wasn't like a maternity leave necessarily. You were given the opportunity to spend all of your sick leave and vacation time, right? Which is not the same thing. But I did. So I had 3 months with Braun where I was able to take off and be home. That was also very difficult for me. I did not enjoy being a stay-at-home mom. I was ready to come back to work. And then I'm fast forwarding a little bit here, but a year later, right, I have a second baby. My kids are 13 months apart. I didn't have enough sick days and leave built up to have a maternity leave with Harper. And I had a boss who was a godsend, and he had been there for like 30 years and had, I don't know, 2 years worth of sick leave saved up or something crazy. He donated his time so that I could have a maternity leave with Harper, which I'm talking about something like a gift you can give to a young working mom. Like, that was a huge thing.
Yeah. Wow. That's phenomenal. I did not know that. And, a lot of, new mothers don't even have that as an option. So that's
Absolutely
fantastic. So Tiffany, talk to me more about postpartum depression. I mean, when did you start feeling that something just wasn't right? And did you seek a therapist?
Yeah. So I guess I probably thought that something wasn't right kind of immediately. I just really struggled to bounce back from having the baby. And in the scheme of things, it wasn't really a traumatic birth or anything like that. And he was healthy and everything was fine. I remember distinctly every day at 3:00, I would burst into tears. I had no idea why. I've never suffered from any sort of, mental health issues. I am not a real emotional person. So the idea of crying every day was like super foreign to me. I would think like, I would feel very like isolated and trapped, right? I felt like I was like chained to the house and this baby and I couldn't get out. And I would think like, oh my gosh, what has happened to my life? Right? Like, I lived for a summer in San Francisco with an apartment overlooking the bay. And now I'm like chained to this baby who cries all the time. And just felt like I said, kind of trapped and just in this place that just wasn't good. Right. I did not talk to a therapist. In hindsight, I certainly should have. But again, I don't feel like that I was educated on that. Right. Like, at the doctor's office, first of all, we get one post-baby checkup, which seems asinine to me, but we have one checkup with our doctor, and they basically ask, like, are you suicidal? Have you had any thoughts of hurting yourself or the baby? Well, the answer to that was no, but there was really nothing else about like, how else are you feeling emotionally? How are you feeling? Are you feeling depressed or anxious? Or there was just none of that. And so had I been asked those questions and been encouraged to do that, I certainly would have. It just wasn't something that was really on my radar at all.
Yeah, I can relate to so much of that. I remember being 1 month postpartum with my son, and I was just had a checkup, and the doctor was like, "Hey, try to make time for yourself every single day. Like maybe that's going for a walk or something." And I literally just started bawling right there in the doctor's office. So there's just so many emotions that are happening to a new mother because you love your child, you love your baby, but then it's like, what is this new life? And that baby is so dependent on you, and especially as a mother, especially if you're breastfeeding. I mean, there's just a lot that's happening hormonally and just from the standpoint of your life, just completely changing. So,
Exactly. Well, like I said, Cari, I hadn't been around babies. So I didn't know that some of this was abnormal. I didn't know that babies weren't supposed to vomit across the room. I didn't know that they should sleep more than, like an hour at a time, or that he was starving. I didn't know any of that. So I just thought it was this normal and this hard. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm stuck in this forever. I had no idea.
well, talk to me about your support system at that time. I mean, you were married. Did you have any family support on either side of your family that was there?
Uh, yeah, from a distance, right? So we don't live in the same town as any family. But I had family that would, be willing to like come over, and sometimes when I would have to go on a work trip, either my mom or my mother-in-law would come and help watch the kids and that kind of stuff. Now, during those first kind of 3 months when I was home, it was, primarily me. My husband was working, and so it was just me at home. And so in that time, there wasn't like somebody physically here. Now, certainly from a support system, afar, family members had great friends, things like that.
So, in hindsight, if you could roll back the clock and do it all over again, what advice would you have given yourself or to other women in a similar situation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess a couple of things I would say, the first is I should have sought out either a therapist or medication or something for my own mental health. And that's something I really would encourage people to do. I also think it would have been helpful, again, had other people talked about that they went through this as well, which again is something I really try to do now because of that. And then the third thing, I think I needed to just settle down, which isn't shocking if you know my personality, right? But I was just so uptight and so trying to do this right. I mean, like I had the checklist and I had the schedules and I was just trying to do it right. And I just think there was so much pressure on me. And I'm sure that the baby could feel me being so stressed out all the time. I compare that to my second child, right? So at that point, I have a newborn and a 13-month-old. It was chaos all the time. But then I was like, I can keep a baby alive, right? Like I know how to do this. It was a completely different experience because I had just settled down so much, I think.
Right. I know when you first are a mother and like, oh my gosh, my baby's crying. And,
Yes.
now it's like, well, they will survive.
And they'll be fine.
I know that Rachel Hollis is a little controversial, but it reminds me of that chapter of the book in Girl Wash Your Face, where she talks about motherhood and just lean in or embrace the chaos, I think is the name of the chapter there. So I think that's a lot of it, is that motherhood is going to have chaos, like no matter what stage you're in, and to learn to accept that. And I have to say, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I know for me, I'm very type A. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. And so having chaos around me is very difficult to deal with. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, two things I would say on that. The first one is having kids really calm me down. I had to let go of a lot of the like control freak type A, like I just had to let that go. And I think it's been good for me. I might be a terrible person had I not gotten that lesson, right? So absolutely. I think that you do just have to kind of lean into that and we're all doing the best we can, right? The other thing I would say there, Cari, you talked about like the kind of the different seasons of motherhood. That's something I find really useful, is to keep in mind different people are really good at different seasons, right? I was not a great little baby mom. I loved those kids. That was not my jam, right? I'm telling you what, if I could push pause on like 6 and 7, I would do it. I love having a 6 and 7-year-old. Like they are so fun. And so I would just tell people, like, remember that, right? That there are different seasons, I think, that different people really thrive in. And it's okay if maybe you're not in like a season that really feels like this is what I'm made for, kind of a thing.
Yeah, that's such good advice. So let's fast forward. You're done with your maternity leave. It's time for you to go back to work. How did you navigate childcare?
I will tell you, I think childcare is maybe the most difficult part of being a working mom. And certainly there are people who've had it a lot harder than me. Initially, I sent my kids to a friend of mine who was a stay-at-home mom, and she agreed to watch them. So it was just my kids and her kids that were there. It was amazing. My kids loved it. It was like they were part of this family. It was great. And then when Harper was about 6 months old, my friend decided to go to nursing school, which I've joked for a long time that I prayed she wouldn't get in. I didn't. She's a great nurse, and we're thrilled for her. But that really sort of upended this like idyllic little situation we had. And so Harper was 6 months old. Braun was about 1.5 years, and we put him in a daycare. We live in a real rural area here in the Panhandle. And in our county, there was one daycare option. Luckily, they had spots, so that worked out fine. And my kids went to a little Montessori school. It was great. I have nothing but positive things to say about that school. They learned a lot as far as, I mean, truthfully, like academic stuff and social things and all of that. So we were very lucky in that we had a great school. But man, it just felt like there was always something, right? And Cari, I know you and I have talked about this. The first year your kids are in a daycare is absolute madhouse because everyone is sick all the time.
Yeah, I was not prepared for that. And I know that I have not had my children in daycare for a very long period of time.
Yeah.
But, I just felt like, oh, daycare, this is the answer. And I'm going to put my kids in daycare and I'm going to have all this stability in my life. And then it's a different type of instability. And your child is sick on top of that, which is very difficult to experience as a parent. So
that I distinctly remember calling my dad one day and just saying, like, I'm gonna have to quit my job to just take kids to a doctor. Like, this is it's terrible. And then the daycare's closed. So we're closed for Christmas. We're closed for this holiday. We're closed on a random Thursday because there's a basketball game. And again, it's like but my job's not closed. So that was a thing. And then also, I had kids in daycare during COVID. And so the daycare just completely shut down for from March until August or whatever. And I'm at home trying to do this job. My kids are like 2 and 3. It was chaos. I remember one time I'm in the middle of like teaching on water law, and my little boy comes in and he has shoved a marble up his nose.
Oh no.
I had to like
kind of my nightmare.
Pause the webinar, go extract this marble from his nose, and then come back. And it was like, again, like we're all just doing the best we can,
Yeah. Wow. So how long were you basically working at home with the kids when COVID hit?
Yeah. So everything kind of shut down in March of 2020. And so we were home from March until August. In the middle of August, Braun started pre-K at the school. And here it's an all-day pre-K. So I just then had one kid. And what I ended up doing is I hired someone to come to the house. It initially was a high school kid because they weren't in class either, right? So I had a high school student who was there. Then I hired someone who babysat Harper at our house because the daycare still wasn't open. And so we did that for 6 months until that, I guess it would have been the start of 2021.
So talk to me, Tiffany, about, I guess both kids are in school. Is that right? At this point in time?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I love talking to people about their routines. Like, would you want to give us a peek in the day in the life of Tiffany on a school day?
Sure. And my life is a little bit wonky because I mentioned earlier that we're a ranching family. We also show livestock. And so you're going to see that a chunk of my time is spent as a livestock show feeding mom. So, I start the day, I get up around 6:30 or so, and the kids get up about 7. And luckily they have breakfast at school, so I don't have to cook in the mornings, which is nice. So I get them up, get them out the door. Then I come home and feed show animals. And so that in the morning, I can do it pretty quickly. I could probably knock that out in about 30 minutes. And then I go to the office, and if I'm in the office, right? So, and if I'm in an office, typically I'm doing things like answering emails, writing blog posts, recording podcasts, researching different issues, things like that. If it's a day when I have a presentation, maybe it's a presentation on Zoom, or maybe I'm in the car traveling somewhere to speak in person. I have a high school student named Riley who is a saint who picks my kids up after school and watches them until 5:30 or 6 when I get home. Then I make dinner, we do spelling words and math flashcards and that kind of stuff. And then the evening chores start, right? And those ones take significantly longer. There's a lot more we have to get done during that time. And so usually we do part of the chores kind of together. Then the kids come in and get ready for bed. I put the kids to bed. I go back out then and get the chores finished up. And then I try to do, I've got like a Bible reading practice that I do and some things like that. I try to be asleep by about 11. So that's kind of the routine.
Well, I know you're always posting photos on social media that you run, you're on your Peloton bike. And so talk to me, when do you make time for yourself?
Yeah. So I found probably the single most important thing I can do for myself from a mental health standpoint is to work out. And so for me, it fits in different every day. So there are some days where I'm going to fit it in the morning. So like I'll drop the kids off at school and immediately try to get my workout in, whether that's like I said, a Peloton bike, I've got a Peloton treadmill, I run outside, I've got weights at home. So I don't have a gym. It's all at home. Sometimes I do it in the morning. There are sometimes, particularly if the weather's nice, I'll try to finish working about 5 o'clock and then do that before I go home to the babysitter. So that's my favorite time to do it, is if I can go like 5 to 5:30, do the workout. On days that are chaos, when none of that works, I'll do it after I put the kids to bed. So there are times when you will see me on the Peloton leaderboard at 10 p.m. because I've just got to get that in. And it's something I really try to do. Like I probably 5 or 6 days a week, I'm religious about working out.
That's awesome. I'm so jealous. This is something that I personally am really struggling with. I mean, I'm not going to lie, like just Wednesday this week, I had scheduled to do Zoom yoga. I do yoga with my instructor in New York City, and I canceled it because I just was like, I'm overwhelmed with work. Like I just need the time for myself right now. And I feel still today, I feel guilty because I put my work ahead of my own health and then to go home and take care of my children. And so what advice do you have for me or to other parents that are struggling with this?
It's hard. I wish that there was some magic formula to how this works. I mean, and like I said, you can see for me, I wish I had a set time a day that I do it. I don't even have that, right? What I will tell you is I'm a better mom and I'm a better employee when I have taken even that, 30, 45 minutes for myself to do that. And so I just kind of know, like, there are other things that may go by the wayside, right? I would love to read more. I would love to like go do social things with my friends, like happy hours or things like that. I don't really have a huge social life because, right, I just don't have the time. So when I'm looking at a list of like things to prioritize, again, for me, for my mental health, that workout's pretty high just to try to keep me from, being a terrible person to be around.
I hear you. So one of the things that we had talked about, Tiffany, before the podcast was the importance for women to ask for help or to talk about, how other people can help. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I think I've got a good story on this. I've got a dear friend who's a young mom, and we were talking over the summer, and I said something about my cleaning lady. And she was like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Oh, well, since Braun was born, I have someone who I've hired who comes in. It's just every 2 weeks, she comes in and cleans the house, right? So like, don't get me wrong, I still have to pick up stuff every day and sweep and things like that. But I told her I haven't scrubbed a toilet in years because my cleaning lady takes care of that kind of stuff." And about 4 months later, my friend called me in tears, and she says, "I just want you to know, I just got home from my first day when my cleaning lady came, and I am crying because it's such a weight off of my shoulders. And I just didn't know this was something we were able to do until you mentioned it." And so that was just a huge light bulb to me about, like, we have to talk about what help we have, because we're so bad about it. We compare ourselves to what we see on Instagram or Facebook, or even just if you just talk to me in passing, right? It's not going to come up that I have a cleaning lady and I have Riley who watches my kids after school, and you wouldn't know these things, right? And so again, I just think it's so important to realize nobody is doing everything alone, right? And there are times I do this on Instagram all the time, where when my house looks like a bomb went off, I'll show it and say, like, look, you know, somebody will think that I have it all together. And yeah, I got my workout in today, but my house looks like a bomb went off, right? Or I haven't washed dishes in 3 days. It's all, I mean, we're all just doing the best we can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What do you think it is? Why do you think women have a hard time talking about those kind of things, or just even asking for help?
Yeah, and I'll give you what I think. I'll qualify this, and you can speak to this more, Cari. I don't know if this is a Southern thing, maybe, because I, grew up in the Southern part of the country, but I think that we feel so guilty that we can't do, like, what's our job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's right or wrong anymore, whatever. But I think that we feel like our job is taking care of the kids and tending the house and all of these things. And we can't keep up with that, particularly when we have another very demanding full-time job as a lawyer, right? There's just no way to do it all. But I think that somehow, even if we know that in our heads, I think we still feel this guilt of, gosh, I'm failing if I can't do all of these things I'm supposed to do, right? And so I just think we have to let go of some of that I'm supposed to do XYZ, because nobody can do everything, right? If you're a working mom, you cannot do everything, because you look at the hours, I've seen some statistics, Cari, you might have seen them too, on like estate planning stuff that talks about the cost it would take to replace the work a stay-at-home mom does. It's like over $100,000 a year to have someone who did all of those things. And we're trying to do that plus this career that's, well over 40 hours a week for most of us. It's not possible. It's not possible. So, but even though I know that in my head, how that feels in my gut and the guilt that I feel over it is a different story.
Yeah, childcare is hard. And sometimes I almost feel like I go to work for a break, if you know what I mean. So just
I say all the time that my hardest job starts at 5:30 when I get home. That's the hard job, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I have said this publicly before. I mean, I have a personal assistant who cooks for me, and she cooks for my whole family. And I started using a personal assistant prior to me having children, probably around 2019 or so. And even at that time, whenever I told people that I had, someone to help me cook meals and did laundry for me and help run errands, other women were like, I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know that existed.
Right.
And it does. It does. So
Right.
And women need to talk about it. How are we getting help and all the things there.
I think so too. Yeah, totally.
So Tiffany, we're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsor, and we'll be right back to talk about being a livestock mom. This episode of the Billable Mom podcast is brought to you by Rinker Law PLLC, focusing in food, farm, and family. When I'm not a mother juggling two littles at home, I am the principal attorney of this nationally recognized law practice, where we believe that strong communities have both strong families and a food, fiber, and agriculture system. At Rinker Law, not only do we do family and matrimonial law, but we work with entrepreneurs and agriculture producers on business, estate, and succession planning. We are a client-focused, results-driven law practice. At Rinker Law, we also support other billable moms, not only in the workplace, but also with clients, helping them live their dreams, both in business and at home. For more information, visit us at www.rinkerlaw.com, Cari Rinker, food, farm, and family. All right, Tiffany, I know that you mentioned before that you guys have livestock and you've got to do chores twice a day. So not only you're feeding your kids, you're feeding animals. And you've entered the show season part of your life. So do you talk a little bit for our listeners on what that means exactly, and how are you juggling that extracurricular activity, so to speak, in addition to being a working mother?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so, those of us who kind of grew up in 4-H and FFA in rural areas are all real familiar with kind of livestock showing. Some people that grew up differently may not be. So it's a little bit like you watch the National Dog Show, right? Thanksgiving, where they have the different dogs and they bring them out and the judge like picks the best one. It's a little similar to that, right? That would give you an idea of what that's like. And for us, truthfully, it's kind of like a sport, right? So the way you might have kids on like a traveling soccer team where you travel around to different tournaments and things like that, we travel around the country to different livestock shows and show our animals. So it's a huge time commitment, which even though I grew up this way, I'm not sure I realized quite what that was going to be like as a parent until now. And so my kids right now show mini Hereford steers. And we've shown all over the country. We've been all over Texas, certainly. We've been to Denver. We've been to Cattlemen's Congress in Oklahoma City. And then we also, like I said, my family raises show lambs. And so we show sheep as well. Again, we've shown all over Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico. We show at a big national show in Reno every year. And so it's a big time commitment, right? There's a lot of time and a lot of money tied up in these animals. But I will tell you, as far as, raising kids, and I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to do it. And I think whatever activity your kids are interested in, a huge gift you can give to them is being interested in that as well. But for us, man, it's been a great way to raise kids, and we've really enjoyed it. I tell this story a lot. My little girl was very shy. I mean, just painfully shy, like wouldn't walk in somewhere if people were looking at her. So like if she had to walk up an aisle at church or on, do something at school, if people were looking at her, she wouldn't do it. She would hide behind me if someone was talking to her. And we bought her this little steer named Bullet, and she showed him now for about 1.5 years. In fact, his last show is going to be in February. So Bullet's retirement is a big topic of discussion at our house. But that calf's made her just a different kid. I mean, she is so confident, and she goes into these big shows in this ring with this 900-pound calf by herself, and she's talking to judges, and she competed in a public speaking contest at junior nationals, and she's about to play basketball, and all of that I just think would have been impossible for her, but for this calf and what he was able to do for her. So again, huge time commitment, huge money commitment, worth every penny what it's done for. I told about Harper, but it's done for both of my kids and the experiences that we get to have together as a family.
That's great. And listen, I know that you work at Texas A&M Extension, so they are, an advocate for this type of an activity. But what advice do you have for other working mothers, whether or not it's livestock shows or travel volleyball or AAU basketball or dance, trying to help your child excel in the extracurricular activity, but still managing work responsibilities?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, flat out, I am super fortunate at A&M. I'm faculty, and so I'm able to accrue, a good number of vacation days. And, my family doesn't go on vacations. We go to livestock shows. And so that's one thing we do, right? I think the other thing is, and it's hard, right, to try to balance what you can do for your kids while still keeping your career going. And there are things I can't do. I don't do school field trips ever. I don't do class parties, and my kids will be like, well, why don't you come to that? And the answer is, well, I have to be at work, right? I use my vacation days for us to go show at Denver. I use my vacation days for us to go show at San Antonio. And so we have to sacrifice that somewhere else. Another thing is I'm fortunate in that I can be pretty flexible with my working hours. And so, there are times where I'm squeezing work in here or there just to get by and keep fires put out enough while I'm gone on a trip to make that work. And again, I just really have to think about like, what are my priorities here? And especially in this season for me, making sure my kids can do this is a real high priority. Now I'll tell you, I've got it somewhere. I've got a calendar here of all the livestock shows we have in Texas. We can't go to all of them, right? Like there's no way with a working mom, we can go to every single show. And so we do have to pick and choose. We have to make some decisions like that. But at the end of the day, like, it's worth the hassle to me and worth the trying to sort out the crazy schedules because of the benefits it gives my kids and that time we get to spend together as a family.
That's awesome. And I love that you made a point that, time is limited. You can say yes to some things, but you're gonna have to say no to others. I mean, I think that that's the thing, is that we're all only have so many hours in the day, and whether or not it's choosing to clean your house or, have a Peloton workout or go to this livestock show and not, another school trip. I mean, we're all just making decisions, and some of them are tough.
That's right. Well, and Cari, I heard a podcast right about the time my kids started school, and it was Christine Kane, who's like a Christian speaker, talking about it. And she said that she never went to a class party and she felt guilty about it. But she runs this like Christian organization that like saves women from sex trafficking. And so she's like, I'm using my gifts and it's kind of important, but like my kids just see that I'm not at the party. And so one time, like she saw her kids going up and running and hugging the another mom at the school who was the room mom, who like her deal was she brought cupcakes and she was at every party and she volunteered for the PTA and all of these things. And she said what she realized was everybody has their own gift. And by her saying, I'm not the class party mom, it let the other woman use her gift to like her fullest capacity. And Christine Kane could use her gift to its fullest capacity because they weren't trying to do things that weren't theirs to do. And I can't tell you the freedom that gave me to be like, I am not going on your field trip because that's someone else,
So Tiffany, I know that you are not a billable lawyer, in the traditional sense, but you did have that part of your career, and I'm curious, what advice that you would have for women, attorneys, or other kinds of professionals that maybe have billable hour requirements that they need to make with their employer.
Yeah. And I probably am not the best person to give that, right, Cari? Because like you said, in that part of my life, when I was billing hours, I wasn't married and I didn't have kids. And I'll be straight with you. I had no idea what the working moms at that law firm were going through. I mean, I remember it was a big deal that there was a mom with 2 kids and she kind of wanted to have a couple of days where she could work at home. And this is different now because of COVID. But at the time it was like, oh no, like she needs to be in this office and billing her time and things like that. And I remember not really understanding, like, why is this such a big deal? Like, she could just come to the office. It's a big deal. But I had no idea. Right. And so, I think advice-wise, I would just say, again, there's only so much time in the day, right? You could only do what you can do. And I just think until someone's in that situation, it's really hard to understand what that pressure feels like and how hard it is to juggle those things. And again, since I'm not somebody who does it, I won't even try to offer advice. But I will say, as an outsider, I just had no clue what that would be like.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, so Tiffany, I'm curious, are there books or other resources that have helped you along your motherhood journey?
Yeah, a couple of things I would recommend. One of them, there's a child psychologist in New York City named Dr. Becky Kennedy. So Cari, if you could find her the next time you're in the city and like make us friends, that'd be awesome. Dr. Becky Kennedy, and she does a lot of work with kids and parenting. I think they call her like the millennial parenting whisperer. She's fantastic and has really been helpful for me in how I approach kind of relating to my kids and disciplining kids and things like that. I've got one child in particular that they call kind of a deeply feeling kid. And Dr. Becky does a lot of like to help you kind of navigate through that. She got a great podcast. She's got a book. It's called Good Inside. So I think that's really great. Another book I'd recommend, and it's really not like parenting strategies or anything. It's kind of a memoir of a parent who was a reporter and traveled with various presidents. And it's kind of a lessons about what he learned about his son through raising his son who had autism and traveling with different presidents. It's called Love That Boy. And it's by an author named Ron, I think you say Fournier is his last name. But both of those I thought were really impactful and kind of stuck with me. One other thing I would mention, there's a podcast I really like. It's called Raising Boys and Girls. And it's with a couple of psychiatrists, psychologists, I'm not sure, from Nashville, Sissy Goff and David Thomas. And I have found their work and that podcast to be really helpful as well.
Great. I so appreciate that. So Tiffany, how can our listeners find you?
Yeah, for sure. So kind of from a work standpoint, if you're interested in kind of my agricultural law type work, I've got a podcast called Ag Law in the Field where we talk about ag law issues. Cari's been a guest before. I've also got a blog. It's called the Texas Agriculture Law blog. So you can check that out. And I've got Texas Agriculture Law on different social media handles. From a personal perspective, the best place to find me is on Instagram. I have an account called Always a Farm Kid. And then I've got a blog that I infrequently post on by the same name. It's just alwaysafarmkid.com.
And you such great work. I do appreciate that. So Tiffany, thanks so much for coming on and having this very candid conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks, Cari. I think that what you're doing here is really important. And I'm glad that you're helping us all like feel less alone and be able to hear what other moms are doing.
Thank you for listening to another episode of The Billable Mom. At The Billable Mom, we don't pretend to have the answers, but instead have all the questions. Please find us on social media and join the conversation at The Billable Mom on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X, Pinterest, and YouTube. We also have a Facebook group where like-minded billable moms find solidarity and provide a resource to one another. You can learn more about The Billable Mom and our picks for juggling work and motherhood at www.thebillablemom.com. You can also connect with Cari Rinker directly on social media at Cari Rinker. Until next time, let's calm the chaos 6 minutes at a time.